Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in Eno's latest webinar. I'm Brianne Eby, a Senior Policy Analyst at Eno. Today I'm looking forward to a discussion about how road user charging can influence traveler behavior, especially in light of the current pandemic. Today's presentation will cover how road user charging can manage the load on regional transportation systems by using technology to manage networks and incentivize specific travel choices. Joining us today is Marc Deflin, Vice President of Business Development for Road User Charging at Cubic Transportation Systems. Marc has 30 years of experience in engineering, project management, and business development in road user charging, and has a specific expertise in tolling and back office operations. While Marc is speaking, you can submit questions using the questions function at any time, and we'll then go to a Q&A, and of course you can submit questions then as well. We'll try to hit as many of the questions as we can. Today's presentation will be available after the fact on Eno's website. With that, I will turn it over to Marc.
Thanks, Brianne. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here, privileged to be here, and I want to thank Eno for that opportunity. Looking forward to the discussion today. I think it's very timely, and I know we have a lot of folks out there who are experts in their field. So especially looking forward to the feedback and the dialogue going forward. So first slide, if you can go forward. I'd like to level set what we're talking about when we say, road user charging. I think that word, that term has different meanings, and it does. It certainly includes road tolls, traditional road tolling, includes mileage-based user fees, whether time or distance, and includes congestion charges, charges designed to discourage certain classes of vehicles, low emission zones, that sort of thing. Generally, road user charging in the toll environment is done to pay back the bonds, raise money for infrastructure debt. And the congestion charging, it's meant to manage congestion. It's a tool that through pricing we can manage congestion. Certainly in the case of low emission zones, take it to the next step and really apply it as an environmental tool to limit certain classes of vehicles from entering a zone. What we've seen around the world certainly is Stockholm has a road user charging congestion pricing scheme, as does London, as does Singapore. Those are the three that come to mind and are the main examples of what's been done in the world. As you may know, New York is launching a program. It's currently in the works, and they're hoping to get that launched as soon as possible. We've seen the congestion pricing to some extent elsewhere in the country. I think of Miami, I think of the Washington, D.C. area, I think of LA. These are generally corridor-based congestion pricing, dynamic pricing type schemes that are designed to limit the volume of vehicles on a certain time of day by increasing the price until such point that demand goes away. But to me, that's really a corridor pricing, dynamic pricing, and it doesn't go all the way to congestion charging. So in today's context, I'd like to talk about congestion charging in terms of an urban environment trying to optimize their transportation network as a whole, and really focused on moving people more than moving vehicles or moving buses. If all the buses are on time and the service is great and it's clean, but nobody's riding the bus, that's not a great system. Same thing, if everybody's in their cars using a toll road, the revenues might be high, but that's probably not the main goal of a congestion management scheme. So let's go forward with that understanding, and let's look at what's happening in the world today. If you could go to the next slide. This is showing mobility trend data from Austin, Texas. So the darker blue line there is vehicles driving, private vehicles, and the light blue line is transit. We saw, back in February before the pandemic, year over year, people were getting into the public transit systems and doing even walking. With the pandemic, all of those modes dropped off precipitously, of course, and then began to bounce back. Certainly driving has come back, private vehicles, but what we've seen in the case of public transit is a little bit of a comeback, but then a leveling off. And it just seems that people aren't quite ready to get back into a crowded bus or a crowded subway. And in fact, here in Texas, you can see kind of an upswing and then a leveling off again in the downturn as they went through, kind of a second wave, if you'd call it, or a reemergence of COVID after maybe they opened up too early. So it's really interesting, I think, to look at transportation trends and how people are getting around as an indicator of what's happening in our overall daily lives. The next slide is very similar, just taking a snapshot of Seattle, Washington. We can see there that they didn't go through, kind of a second dip due to the pandemic, and it looks like driving is coming back very strong, but transit again leveled off. So what does that mean? Let's jump to the kind of the conclusion slide. Next slide, please. Certainly private vehicle travel recovered much faster than transit. In fact, too fast and probably too steep. I've heard experts say that if private vehicles increased by more than 10 or 15% from where they were pre-pandemic, we could see gridlock, and that's a terrible thing. Unfortunately, that is an outcome of a healthy economy, is people are at least moving around and conducting their business. But if they're all in private vehicles, that makes us less competitive, and we lose more available profits and revenue to being stuck in our cars. I think a healthy trend, active mobility is recovering fast. We see a lot of cities converting available space to bike lanes. I don't know if you tried to buy a bike during COVID, but it was very difficult. Even the stationary bikes, there's a 10-week wait for Peloton, I've heard. So maybe there's some positive outcomes here that people are embracing rental bikes and kind of that micro ride sharing opportunities. But on the right, again, public transport is not coming back. It hit a floor level and it just has not bounced back. And I think that's really a struggle and a challenge for our metropolitan planning organizations across the country, as not only their revenue drops, but their congestion is just out of balance. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to rebalance that load. How can we get back and convince people to get back in the buses and the public transit systems and feel safe about it. So the next slide is a summary. This is from Samuel Johnson. Samuel is the president of the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association, as well as CEO of his own toll facility in Southern California. And Samuel has been in this industry as a thought leader and expert for many, many years. But his quote there, discusses this need to rebalance the demand across modes. So, even toll operators want to see that happen. They know that's important to the overall health of the transportation network in their regions, and maybe even to the agencies, particularly to the agencies of which they're a member, is these revenues associated with all the different modes and a balancing of the load to really manage congestion and not create the gridlock that could happen. So the next slide, please. A while back, Cubic commissioned the Wathen Group to take a look at what is needed for a successful roadway pricing program. And what you see on this slide is a synthesis of their answers, a word cloud, if you will. And one thing that kind of surprised me is right there in the middle in red is transit service. So if you want to have a successful road pricing, congestion management, congestion pricing program, you need good transit service. you need an alternative. People need to, there need to be other modes beyond just private vehicles. And clearly public perception and how this is done, transparency, communication are all so important. Leadership is so important. So, you know, just to that point, I wanted to read a quote, and this is from the report we had commissioned. And if you'll bear with me while I read this quote, I think it's poignant. With transit and roadway together as an integrated system approach, improvements can be streamlined or bundled together. There are several different boards and agencies in the Bay Area that must be mandated to merge to work together better and more efficiently. And that requires meaningful consolidation. For me, it's about getting the data from the systems and running them as one system more efficiently. All the issues about who gets what revenue and investing in what projects is less of a concern. All that will work out naturally, especially if there are fewer players in the game. So I think what this talks to is, you know, kind of breaking down those organizational silos, some of that institutional friction of looking at the customer as a traveler, not as a driver, not as a subway user, but as a commuter who wants to get, you know, to their destination in the most efficient, most cost-effective, maybe least lowest carbon footprint manner available. And if their patterns and their needs and their desires can be coalesced in a common data structure, we can break down those data silos. I think we really have the beginning of a powerful tool to influence that behavior. So next slide, please. We certainly have the technology. You know, I don't think technology is ever the barrier. There's this confluence of ITS and ETC technologies that are enabling, you know, successful congestion management strategies. I have a picture of Pittsburgh there because we all learn in Pittsburgh that that word confluence, and that's the coming together of two separate bodies. In this case, it's the Allegheny River and the Monongahela River at the point forming the Ohio River. Also happened to be the launching point for Lewis and Clark's expedition. So not to bring that to that level, but I think we are on another expedition here, and that is how to solve the urbanization of our cities and really attack congestion with the tools that we have. Intelligent transport systems have certainly given us some very powerful tools, and the electronic toll collection industry has, you know, improved license plate capture. The cameras are so powerful and so accurate. The optical character recognition algorithms are improving every day to put more and more automation into that function. We do have dynamic pricing algorithms, so we do have some good experience on how to price things and you know, get that price, that supply demand curve just about right, using pricing as the nudge, as the mechanism to enforce that behavior. So again, you know, the technology is here, and it's not a technical issue. We could go to the next one, please. So, you know, what are some of the tools needed? You know, I think we need a multimodal platform. At Cubic, we have an urban mobility back office. This is a back office that is structured for transportation type transactions, whether they're subway, buses, tolls, and it's a unified, you know, customer relationship management system. And this again treats the customer, the commuter, as a traveler. You don't have to have one account if you're using the bus and a different account if you're using the roads and paying tolls. Why can't that be a single account, a one account type approach? Mobility wallet, if you will, universal transportation account. You probably heard these terms before, but I think it makes sense. And when you go to that structure, now you have the transactions, you have their history, you have their preferences, you can look ahead even, and maybe with, you know, the new world we're going to live in, they're not going to work every day, but 2 days a week. So you get to know this customer better, and you know, they go downtown Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're not going downtown. So let's get out to them and really communicate what alternatives they might have for their route, time of day, and how they might save time, they might save money, they might have a lower impact on the environment. And we can customize some of those incentives based on who they are and how they travel and what their preferences are, really creating a nice relationship. We need data. We need real-time monitoring, data streaming, and we're getting that. Cubic has two companies, Trafficware and GridSmart, who have incredibly powerful intersection management tools that through artificial intelligence and powerful cameras can really collect excellent data to help, whether it's optimize the timing of signal lights, giving buses priority, sensing bicycles to extend a red light, say, to make sure that those bicycles get through that intersection safely. A lot of cars don't really look for bicycles. I know that from personal experience. So smarter systems where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, are needed, and we have those. Analytics, so important. I know in our tolling industry we have not done a really good job with analytics. We're getting a lot better, we really are. But we've had all this data, so much good data, and we haven't collected it, we haven't analyzed it, we certainly haven't presented it in a manner that allows us to take good, actionable decisions. But we do have that ability now. We have a dynamic mobility applications platform that does just that, and it gets smarter every day with its AI algorithms built in. And with that platform, we can understand users' behaviors, understand their preferences, and offer them personalized incentives that are important to them to maybe alter their mode of travel or just give them better information. And sometimes that's what people want is better information. They understand delays, they understand that stuff. But if you can get them that information, they're a lot more comfortable with it. I think of myself at an airport and you see the flight being delayed, and you never know why. And that's frustrating. We know how frustrating that can be. Sometimes if we understand why, we can come up with our own rationale, even make our own prediction of when it might finally take off. But without any information, we're just frustrated. And then certainly we need to open up these systems. We need to allow third-party web and mobile applications to come in. And with that, the private sector startups can take it to the next level beyond even what a large company like Cubic or your company might be able to do. But using the entrepreneurial skills and intelligence and motivation to really add value, we need to open up the APIs and make it an open architecture. We've done that, and we've recently teamed with MoveIt, a journey planning application that allows you to plan your trip from A to B, and you can select modal choices, or it might select for you based on optimization of time or money or whatever your criteria is. And that to me is pretty powerful. And it might even allow you, for the final part of your trip to understand, all right, I get to the subway station, I can either take an Uber, I can walk a block and rent a bike, or here's the walking route, and it's only 3 or 4 blocks, even shorter than a drive because of the one-way streets and the congestion within the city. So I think there's a lot of power in that as well. So again, this is the combination of data, technology, and policy to make this happen. And I believe it's talks like this through Eno that we can get that dialogue going. We know, based on our research with the Wathen group that I alluded to, that people want that. So let's move on then to the next slide, please. Nudging. Nudging, the first time I heard it was a British term out of our work with Transport for London with the London pricing scheme. So nudging is British, and it's a nice way of pushing people to exert behavior, influence behavior in a way that makes sense. And you're certainly not nudging them in a negative direction. You're nudging them based on where we think they want to go anyway, based on the analytics and their preferences. So certainly we need the data coming into the system. We need streamlined ways to pay, single payment, one account. We need the analytics from the authorities to be combined, whether it's public transit data or toll road data, and combining all those sets of information together. And we can create personalized incentives that can actually nudge people in a certain direction. And I think this is a really powerful tool that we can apply to again, balance the load, get us back on track, get that curve back up again, and start to bring the private vehicle curve down, and get us back to where we were in January. We think we're going to come out of this with a really healthy economy. Healthy economies create congestion, and so we got to be ready for it. We have to be ready for it. Next slide, please. So what are the key takeaways? We talked about breaking down silos, organizational silos, data silos. Share that data. Create a common operational view. Don't look at ourselves as providers of transit systems or providers of toll systems. We're mobility enablers. So if we look at it that way, we can really help to optimize and look at the transportation network as a holistic system and really optimize that system. Certainly, we need to rebuild trust. We need to show that the alternative modes are safe and greatly improve the customer experience. I think some of the apps, at least in my industry, are in sore need of improvement, and we are seeing that now. But if we can give a good customer mobile interface to people, that creates a lot of trust. And the next slide, just a couple more key takeaways on this. If you go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there we go. Okay, embracing multimodal mobility. Again, this went back to the discussions we've had with some of the thought leaders over the summer, and we talked to executive director of APTA, the Public Transit Association, and the president of IBTTA, the Tolling Association, and they admitted they don't talk to each other. I've been in tolling for a long time, and I've only been to a couple of APTA conferences. So even all of us need to get kind of more familiar with each other and really look at it as mobility in a multimodal lens. And I think that's going to really help us manage our congestion going forward. And again, finally, nudging, influence of travel behavior, incentivize, personalized incentives to create shifts in how people get to work and how they choose to do that, and give them the best information to make informed choices. Pat Foy, the executive director of the MTA in New York, said, "We are going to be successful not on government mandates or what I say or what the mayor says, but we're going to be successful based on the thousands of decisions millions of people make every single day. So to the extent we can give them good information to make good decisions, then we'll be successful." So I think that's the end of my talk. I want to thank you very much. I think we have time for questions. I also urge you to download our white paper if you'd like to learn more. Reach out to me. Reach out. Let's keep the dialogue going.
Great. Thank you so much, Marc. And we've already had a bunch of questions come in. folks, please feel free to continue submitting those, and I'll try to get to them as best as possible. I might be aggregating some of the themes that come up. Marc, I'll start with one though. So thinking back to the slide where you, the text slide that had a bunch of different key phrases that came out of this internal analysis. One of them, and I think even the biggest one, was public perception. So I'm wondering, given that you started this talk, talking about different terminologies of road user charging and different categories of it, how is the language that we use reflected in public support? How much should we care about the specific terminology that we're using when we describe road user charging?
Yes, that is so important because the public perception is, it's another tax. So I think it needs to be transparent that who's going to benefit from these road user charges, who's going to have to pay for it, and to make sure we're communicating equity across, demographics and socioeconomic populations. To make sure this isn't, making it easier for the bankers and the lawyers to get to work, but really creating an overall improved transportation network. So if it's just that, hey, we're going to charge tolls and try to make your drive shorter, public is going to perceive that as a tax and perceive it as unequitable.
Great, thank you. In the slide where you emphasize that the technology already exists, the technology is not a problem, obtaining that is not, because we already have it. I'm wondering if you can speak to, so I know, for example, London's current system is based on roadside camera technology, but there's a desire there to switch to a more dynamic and comprehensive technology. Do you have insights for best practices of how to facilitate this switch? Is it a financial issue? Is it political? So in other words, if it's not a technology barrier, what are the other elements that need to be addressed to make it happen?
Yeah, certainly in London, if you did this in New York, say, there's a high population of easy pass transponders already in the network. So logically, you could build a system based on RFID, but you still need the cameras to do enforcement because not everybody is going to have a transponder. I think London took the approach that cameras made the most sense and was the most cost efficient because it's not free to put a reader out. Not everybody wants to add a device in their car and feel like they're being tracked everywhere, not just at the camera gantries. At some point we might have a national standard for a chip in our car that communicates through near field communication or 5G or something else to the roadside. But that discussion honestly has been going on 30 years to have a national RFID standard, and I still don't think we're there yet. The phone, the good old-fashioned phone. I saw an interview with the CEO of Ford a while back. He's no longer CEO, but he said, we already have a national standard, and he picked up his phone. It's right here. Let's use this. So I don't think it's clear what makes the most sense. I think it can be location specific. I know in Singapore, they can mandate, what everybody has to do, and everybody does it. That's a different culture, right? That's not going to work everywhere. Stockholm, everybody, the culture there is, I want to contribute as an individual for the common good, and so they'll cooperate and do that. So I think it has to be culturally specific and regionally specific. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that question, Brian.
Got it. This next one that came in is of particular interest to me. My background is in behavioral science, so the idea of nudging and using incentives or nudges to help shape behavior in addition to policies is fascinating to me. Can you provide more specific examples of the types of incentives that could be used to influence traveler behavior?
Yeah. If you have information on the road network and you know how long it's going to take, you might even be able to show someone that, park and ride is your fastest way to get to work today, rather than trying to cross that last bridge. Park on the other side of the city, grab a transit and come on over. And not only do you save that final toll and the congestion charge, but you get there quicker. It may not be as convenient. You get out of the privacy of your vehicle. So a couple things come to mind. Certainly pricing is a nudge. Hit your wallet. But also demonstrating that, oh, by the way, the train or subway we want you to get on, it runs at 60% capacity. So you don't have to feel like you're getting in a shoulder-to-shoulder packed subway where it's not only uncomfortable under normal times, but maybe it's not even, you're not going to do it during the pandemic times. So if we can demonstrate capacity, cleanliness, and nudge people in that behavior, then I think that could work. Another simple way is, for every time you use the toll facility, you get $5 in transit credits, or vice versa. For every 5 subway rides you take, you get $5 in toll credits. So kind of like a gamification program where you get rewarded for your usage to try another mode.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful tool. So, Marc, one of the things that you talked about a bit was integrating a road user charge system with other modes, and I think of this as a mobility as a service type approach. So can you explore a little bit more how an RUC might be synced with other modes like transit, bike share, ride hailing? And there's a specific question about where parking fees, so taxes on parking lots, garages, metered curbside parking and lots, how does that fit into this approach?
Well, I think if you can unify those accounts, those charges, it helps you to get better data, but it also helps the user to see the true costs of this trip. You may not be capturing. You say, "Oh, I'm just paying the $12 toll," but then there's the $20 parking, and the fact that you drive around, it takes time maybe to find a place to park. So if you can unify all of those different monetary requirements of whatever mode you're choosing, and try to optimize it as a whole versus just looking at, well, it cost me $5 to take the subway, but $12 to take the toll road. It's just $7. It's not that much. But if you add it all up and you look in terms of gas and time and parking, then it can add up. And also, if you can add in information about where, so you pop up at the transit station, if you can get information of the location and availability of an e-bike that's nearby, or a shared ride vehicle that is nearby, and you might pop up in the city and not have your bearings, so you're not quite sure where to go. So to integrate that with a traveler app that uses routing to really help that traveler finish their trip would make them more comfortable, maybe not just driving and parking at their destination, which is what we're used to.
And sticking with this idea of single accounts, have you seen any examples of eligibility verification in a single account context across modes? So for example, thinking about eligibility for discounts and special fares or fees for transit versus other modes? Yeah,
those are the business rules are certainly need to be incorporated, and they are region specific, and we can't diminish the importance of incorporating them in whatever solution we put out. The equity considerations around that are paramount, and I have had some discussions in the Bay Area. They're very focused on making sure whatever they do has equity and does not leave some of these payment programs behind, but embraces them and incorporates them. And honestly, the transit systems we put out and others and the tolling systems have these rules in them already, and it's very complicated, believe me. And from a tolling perspective, it's people, why does it cost so much, and why can't you take the toll system from LA and pop it in New York? Well, it's because of all these nuances, local, regionalized nuances, and a lot of them have to do with just what you're talking about. So there's already acceptance of that, and certainly, no one will want to leave those behind, but we really need to embrace those going forward. And that's, it's kind of that word cloud, the perception, the pricing, the fairness, the equity needs to be a part of these programs, absolutely.
Sure. I'm curious how you would respond to privacy concerns that arise with technology-based systems.
Yeah, I think they're always going to be out there, but we're already collecting transit data. We're already collecting tolling data. A license plate per se is not an invasion of privacy. It's a number on a car. You can go out in the parking lot, look at all the license plates you want. Once you link it to a DMV account, then that's an issue. But the industry itself, whether transit or tolling, is very privacy sensitive. The data is owned by authorities. The private companies do not own the data. It could be opt-in. No one's going to force people to use these tools. But every time we use our credit card or make a phone call or fill up our tank with gas or go through a toll booth or turnstile with some sort of automated payment structure, there's a transaction that's recorded, and it's up to us to make sure that's protected. And believe me, this industry does that very seriously. And as far as I know, there have not been major breaches in this area, knock on wood. But it is something that we have to keep top of mind, and certainly in the solutions we put forward, privacy and protection of personally identifiable information is very important.
Thanks. So by and large, I think this discussion has been focused on commuter travel patterns, but how would you envision the role of private freight movement companies in a road user charge system? How does that get managed?
Well, they might not have the same choices that an individual might have. A truck is a truck, and you can't load your truck onto a subway or something like that. But there are discussions of offloading, outside the city limits. Don't take the whole semi into the city. Offload it into smaller parcels. I know there's some tricked out bicycles that have large containers. So Amazon is looking at that as a way to hit that final mile. So I think they're getting creative as well in how they deal with congestion, because generally the worst congestion is at the destination point. That's where all the people are, that's where the goods are going, and that's where it gets tricky. And I know in Amsterdam, I used to live there, they'd offload, stay outside the city, and they'd offload, DHL would do this onto the canal boats, and then the canal boats would distribute it, and then there'd be bicycles, at certain street corners along the canal, and then they'd offload even into smaller loads. But they have to do that. I mean, there's no way a truck is going to get through the streets of Amsterdam. So, there are ways to do it, but we have to be creative. I remember a congressman in Southern California. There's a 710 freeway coming out of the Long Beach port, and it's highly congested because all the shipping containers come there, they load on trucks, and they head out. And the congressman said, I went there was no traffic. Well, he went there at 2 in the morning. So, but the point was, change your day, do your shipping from midnight to 8 in the morning, not 8 to 5. But we get locked into this 8 to 5 mode, and everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. and there's a full another 16 hours in the day that they might have been able to do better. So I think there are ways to get creative and still maintain competitiveness and still be on time with that.
So we'll try to get to one or two more questions here. So you mentioned that there's an assumption that we will have a healthy recovery from the pandemic. But how might this calculus change if the recession is very long and if the recovery takes longer than expected? In other words, how is the efficacy of a road user charge system assessed in real time, and how does that translate into decision making depending on such a wide range of circumstances?
Yeah, certainly recession is going to hurt. The concern is this cycle of congestion, I guess, where if public transit is hurting now and we don't bounce back as strong as, at least I'm kind of optimistic about how we're going to do, but there's other sides of that coin, the full spectrum of views. So let's say it doesn't come through, our public transit is just going to suffer further to the point that maybe they cut back service or cut back number of cars, and I think that just widens the gap, the equity gap, the fairness gap of transportation systems, because the wealthy are driving their cars anyway and can afford to do that, and maybe some of the underprivileged can't, and they're reliant on the public transit. We start cutting those services back, we're going to have this vicious cycle of a downturn in the quality of our transit system. We've made such good strides, and it'd be a shame to have that go backwards. So, I know in New York, one of the main goals of the congestion charging is $15 billion that goes right into public transit. So they're trying to, balance the load, not just in terms of demand, but in terms of quality of service. So I think that's important to look at. Road user charging, congestion charging really needs to look and benefit the transportation system as a whole.
Sure. And one final question, could you, Marc, talk through some good examples of breaking down organizational silos? And I think I understood that as within an entity, but how about also breaking down silos between the public and private sectors?
Yeah, I wish I had a lot of examples of that. I'm not sure I do. And certainly a lot of that is the public sector's, the private sector, maybe hasn't stepped up. One thing we need to do is maybe embrace the consultant community and really communicate with them. The public agencies are often advised, and rightly so, by a very smart set of consultants out there that are looking over the horizon. So we as a private sector need to do a better job in education and reaching out and collaboration across our industry, including the consultant community. And I think that's real important to enhancing the trust, and also furthering the dialogue and really coming up with solutions that are acceptable. As far as the silos, if we can get public transit to come to toll road conferences and toll road leaders to go to public transit conference, maybe that's a start. People start talking to each other, even within their own organizations. I know the governor of Rhode Island, Governor Raimondo, I think, recently announced that she's breaking down those silos within her DOT and eliminating transit and tolling and combining them under one. So maybe that's a trend that we'll see to really help us, break down the organizational silos, so then we can break down the data silos.
Great. And just real quick, there's been a lot of interest in the white paper that you mentioned. Did you say that that's publicly available?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. Maybe we can put a link on Eno's website when we post the slides later, but there's been a ton of interest in that, so I expect follow-up questions.
Email me, marc.deflin@cubic.com. I'm happy to send it right to you.
Great. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you, Marc, and thanks to our listeners. Our next webinar, How Automated Delivery Could Shape the Future of Local Commerce, will be held on Thursday, September 10th. As always, don't forget to sign up for ENO Transportation Weekly for regular updates on our work and other transportation policy matters. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brianne.
Thanks.